Did you believe society when they told you that financial security was a ladder you could only climb through sheer grind and lucky breaks? A narrative that chains your mind to a cycle of lack and anxiety? In this video, you will witness the complete dismantling of that limiting story as we journey through the inner architecture of wealth, and you will learn to rewrite your financial reality from the source, leaving you with a palpable sense of power and a clear pathway to magnetizing abundance. Picture for a moment the invisible blueprints of your finances, etched not in ledgers, but in the quiet, repetitive assumptions you cradle every single day before you even open your eyes. This is where your world solidifies from the vapor of your thoughts, constructing walls of not enough and ceilings of just getting by with the mortar of unquestioned fear. This is how the story you've been telling becomes the house you live in. A structure where every worry about debt becomes another locked door, and every jealous glance at another's success becomes a window you've barred shut. This is the turning point where you must become the archaeologist of your own consciousness, sifting through the layers of inherited lack to find the foundation you yourself laid. But that was only the beginning. Because as you brush away the dust, you'll find the original drawings were always in your possession, faded but never erased. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your current balance is merely a shadow cast by the inner shape of your self-concept, a number echoing the emotional frequency you've broadcast for years. This is why it matters, for you cannot change the printout without first altering the data entered into the cosmic computer of your mind. Think of the quiet desperation of checking an empty account, that hollow pit in your stomach, which is not a verdict but a signal, a direct transmission from the state you inhabit. This is the moment of separation where you must distinguish the outer fact from the inner truth, understanding that facts are malleable echoes of a past imagination. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that your financial history is a story, not a sentence, and you hold the pen to write the next chapter. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that every reasonable fear was a guardian of this old, familiar structure, a seductive lie that felt like prudent realism. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your past conversations about scarcity, your rehearsals of disaster, were all active prayers answered in the form of continued struggle. Watch as the phantom of your former self tries to argue for its limitations, presenting spreadsheets of past failures as proof that the new story cannot be born. This is the path forward, requiring you to deliberately starve that phantom by refusing to feed it with your attention and your anxious, looping narratives. This is where you plant the new seed by deciding just once that you are the kind of person to whom wealth flows easily and naturally, regardless of the current external mirror. This is the silent rebellion against the evidence of your senses, a sacred insurrection where you choose the feeling of financial peace over the gnawing tension in your shoulders. This is how the inner world shifts, as you catch yourself mid-worry and consciously replace the image of lack with the sensory vividness of a solved problem. This is the birth of a new frequency, a subtle hum of relief and certainty that begins to vibrate through your day, altering your posture and your gaze. This is the foundation being poured, not with concrete, but with the unshakable assumption that your needs are met now, and more is on its way. This is where you stop building the house of lack, brick by anxious brick, and finally pick up the new blueprint written in the language of fulfilled desire. Think of the moment when you first dared to rewrite a painful financial memory, not as a lie, but as a surgical act of creation, where you revisited that humiliating overdraft notice and mentally sculpted a different outcome where a surprise check covered the balance. This is where your imagination flexes its sovereign power, pulling you from the passenger seat of your financial history and placing you firmly in the director's chair of a past now reshaped. This is how you dissolve the chains of a fact by bathing it in the new story, feeling the visceral relief of bills paid not in the future, but in the relived past until your emotional body accepts it as truth. This is the turning point where mental alchemy occurs, for as Neville Goddard taught, revision is not mere fantasy, but the divine method for altering the fabric of your being, neutralizing the past's poison so it ceases to project lack into your now. But that was only the beginning, because a single revised scene begins to send shockwaves through your identity, subtly convincing the deepest part of you that you are someone who is always provided for. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the old memory had been feeding your present reality like a hidden pipeline, and you have just capped it at the source. This is why it matters, for every successfully revised moment starves the old narrative of its emotional fuel, draining the swamp of doubt where your financial fears bred. Consider the heavy weight of a past investment loss, and then feel the profound shift as you rewrite the scene to end with a wise, profitable exit, saturating the memory with the thrill of gain and the wisdom earned. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that time is not linear, but a field where you can travel to plant new seeds in old gardens, thereby changing the harvest you reap today. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you find that revision heals not just your wallet, but your soul, replacing shame with dignity and panic with a newfound calm authority. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your subconscious, tricked by the vivid feeling of the revised past, begins to align your present actions with the frequency of that success. Watch as your inner conversations start to change effortlessly, your mental chatter shifting from "I always struggle" to "I remember when things turned around for me," spoken from the felt reality of your new past. This is the path forward, walking through your day with the quiet knowing of someone whose history is now a tapestry of providence and timely blessings. This is where you plant the new seed by making revision a nightly practice, a sacred ritual where you lovingly correct the day's events before sleep, the gateway to the subconscious. This is the silent rebellion against the tyranny of recorded events, declaring your right as creator to edit the script of your life until your entire past supports your wealthy future. This is how the inner world shifts, as the cumulative effect of these revised memories builds a foundation of unshakable financial confidence that feels like remembered fact. This is the birth of a new frequency, a resonance of solved problems that begins to attract present-moment solutions you could not have logically engineered. This is the foundation being poured, with the cement of a past you've chosen, one where you have always been guided, supported, and abundantly provided for in the nick of time. This is where you stop being a victim of chronology and become the author of your entire timeline, understanding that every memory is a living thing you can nourish with new meaning. Ask yourself, what happens when you stop reaching for wealth and instead decide to inhabit it as a present-tense reality, walking through your current apartment as if it were already the spacious home you desire, feeling the texture of prosperity in your now threadbare chair? This is where performance ends and embodiment begins, for you are no longer visualizing a distant fantasy, but consciously occupying the psychological reality of your wish as a tangible, living truth. This is how you cross the bridge of incidents, by collapsing the mental distance between you and your desire, and planting your flag in the promised land of your fulfilled goal before any external evidence arrives. This is the turning point where you wear the cloak of your new identity so completely that your old doubts become like faint, forgotten rumors about a stranger you no longer recognize. But that was only the beginning, because this conscious assumption starts to reorganize your entire perception, filtering your world through the lens of abundance, so you begin to notice opportunities your previous state would have rendered invisible. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the feeling of lack was merely the ghost of an old state, a haunting you can now silence by persistently feeling the naturalness of your wealth. This is why it matters, for assumption mastered is destiny commanded, as Neville taught, meaning your persistent inner feeling must harden into fact in the 3D world, obeying the immutable law of manifestation. Envision a world where checking your bank statement becomes an act of curiosity rather than dread, because you have already impregnated your imagination with the feeling of ample zeros. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that this state is not a euphoric rush, but a quiet, normal, and mundane certainty, the settled knowing of a wealthy person going about their unremarkable day. Yet something deeper was waiting, And so you discover that living in the end requires the surrender of how and when, a divine indifference that trusts the bridge will appear, because you are already on the other side. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your actions begin to spontaneously align with your assumed state, not through forced effort, but through natural, inspired impulses that feel like ease. Watch as you instinctively decline energies and opportunities that mismatch your new frequency, not with struggle, but with the gentle disinterest of someone who knows a better offer is coming. This is the path forward, sustained by a loop of satisfaction where you derive joy not from the having in the future, but from the being in the present, which is the true nourishment the universe requires. This is where you plant the new seed by falling in love with the state itself, romancing the feeling of financial freedom until it becomes more familiar and real than the memory of struggle. This is the silent rebellion against the world's timeline, a glorious declaration that your imagination is the only reality, and the outer world is but a slow-moving, obedient shadow. This is how the inner world shifts, as your emotional home becomes the wish fulfilled, and any intrusive thought of lack is seen as a trespasser to be gently escorted out. This is the birth of a new frequency, a constant, low hum of fulfillment that magnetizes the people, resources, and chances necessary to clothe your assumption in physical form. This is the foundation being poured with the concrete of lived experience, for you are now building your reality from the inside out, from the cause rather than the effect. This is where you stop waiting and start living, understanding that manifestation is not about acquiring something but about becoming someone, and that someone is already whole, already rich, already here. Imagine surrendering to sleep not as an escape from your day, but as a sacred entry into the workshop of the gods, where you, as the sole artisan, craft the coming day's reality through the vivid, feeling-drenched scenes you play in the theater of your mind. This is where you bypass the critical waking mind to speak directly in the language of creation to your subconscious, the faithful servant that accepts your imaginal acts as commands for the outer world. This is how you impregnate the void with form, by looping a short, sensory-rich scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire. Perhaps the feeling of a heavy gold bracelet on your wrist or the sound of a mortgage-burning party, until it feels utterly real and ordinary. This is the turning point where your daydream becomes a deliberate seed planted in the fertile, unquestioning soil of the subconscious, which must then work to bring it into blossom in your waking life. But that was only the beginning, because this practiced scene soon loses the quality of imagination and takes on the tone of a memory, a done deed, that your psyche now works tirelessly to justify and externalize. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your previous anxious pre-sleep thoughts were just as creative, scripting the very cycles of struggle and disappointment you wished to avoid. This is why it matters, for as Neville Goddard proclaimed, the feeling of the wish fulfilled falling asleep is the supreme act of programming your future, aligning your entire being with the assumption that it is done. Picture the profound stillness that follows this mental enactment, a deep sigh of the soul that knows the work is complete, and all that remains is the unfolding. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that this nightly practice isn't a hopeful ritual but a causative act, the most important work you will ever do, for it defines the trajectory of your entire tomorrow. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you find that persistence in this scene is not repetition, but the deepening of a state, the gentle convincing of self until your entire being nods in agreement with the new story. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your dream self and waking self begin to merge, erasing the line between imagination and reality until you walk through your day in a satisfied daze of knowing. Watch as you awaken with a subtle but profound emotional aftertaste of your fulfilled wish, a residual certainty that colors your morning and directs your choices without conscious effort. This is the path forward, where you greet the day not from lack, but from the satisfaction of your nightly communion, immune to the temporary appearances that contradict your planted seed. This is where you plant the new seed every single night without fail, treating it with the sacred consistency of a master gardener tending the most precious of orchards. This is the silent rebellion against chaos, a deliberate ordering of your inner universe each night to guarantee the outer universe has no choice but to conform to your command. This is how the inner world shifts as your dominant pre-sleep feeling becomes the baseline from which all your tomorrows are projected, a self-fulfilling prophecy of your own conscious design. This is the birth of a new frequency, a lullaby of fulfillment that sings to your deepest cells, reprogramming your very biology from stress to relaxation, from scarcity to flow. This is the foundation being repoured in the silent, potent hours of the night, where in the darkness you are closest to the source of all creation, co-writing the script of your dawn. This is where you stop leaving your future to chance and start directing it with purpose, understanding that the last thought you entertain before sleep is the signature on the order you place with reality. Consider the possibility that the moment you firmly assume your new state, the old reality will rally its most convincing storms, presenting a sudden car repair bill or a discouraging bank statement as its final, desperate argument for your return to lack. This is where your faith is not tested, but forged. For these opposing appearances are not signs of failure, but proof of movement, the death rattle of the discarded world as it dissolves to make way for the new. This is how the universe validates your shift, by showing you the stark contrast between the persistent assumption you now hold and the vanishing reality it is actively replacing, a necessary chaos before the new order emerges. This is the turning point where most falter, mistaking this storm for truth and abandoning their state, thereby resurrecting the very lack they sought to escape and cementing it once more. But that was only the beginning, because if you can see the storm as a bridge of incidents in its messy middle chapter, you will understand it is secretly working in your favor, rearranging people and circumstances to deliver your wish. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the bill is not an obstacle, but an actor in your play, guiding you toward an unexpected refund or a forgotten asset that will resolve it in a way that grows your wealth consciousness. This is why it matters, for your unwavering composure in the face of contradictory evidence is the very power that commands the storm to settle into the precise pattern of your desired fulfillment. Envision a world where every financial problem is greeted not with panic, but with a quiet curiosity, a knowing smile that asks, "I wonder how the solution will elegantly appear." This is where truth breaks through, showing you that your peace is the command, and your maintained assumption is the unwavering instruction the universe must follow without exception. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that these storms are the final layers of your old self being shed, the necessary friction for your new skin of abundance to harden and become durable. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your persistent state summons exactly the challenges required to burn away the last of your limiting beliefs, refining your conviction into diamond-like certainty. Watch as you move through the storm, not as a victim, but as the eye of the hurricane, a calm center from which you observe the chaos, completely assured of the calm that follows, because you are already living within it. This is the path forward, where you respond to every alarming headline or overdraft alert with a deliberate revision in the moment, rewriting the narrative in your favor before fear can take root. This is where you plant the new seed by thanking the storm for its service, acknowledging it as a sign of your powerful creation and a harbinger of the inevitable calm you have assumed. This is the silent rebellion against the tyranny of circumstances, a glorious display of your sovereignty where you let the outer world scream while you dwell in the silent satisfaction of your wish fulfilled. This is how the inner world shifts, as you realize your power is greatest when the evidence is most against you, for that is when your assumption, if held, performs its most miraculous work. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of unshakable resilience where setbacks become setups, and every no is recognized as a divine redirection toward a greater yes you couldn't yet see. This is the foundation being repoured, with the reinforcement of tested faith, creating a prosperity that is not a fair weather condition, but a bedrock certainty that weathers all seasons. This is where you stop reacting to the world and start commanding it with your stillness, understanding that the storm has no power except the power you grant it through your belief in its reality. Suppose you discover that the true currency of creation is not your thoughts, but the specific textured feelings that accompany them. The physical sigh of relief after a debt is cleared, the weightless joy of spontaneous giving, the deep-seated security of a perpetual safety net. This is where you become an alchemist of emotion, consciously selecting and cultivating the feelings of your wish fulfilled as diligently as a master gardener tends rare blooms. For these feelings are the direct frequencies that mold reality. This is how you imprint your desire upon the subconscious, by marrying your mental image to a somatic experience so vivid and repetitive that your body believes the event has already occurred, tricking time itself. This is the turning point where you stop thinking about wealth and start feeling wealthy, allowing the luxurious emotion of abundance to circulate through your veins and dictate your posture, your gaze, your very breath. But that was only the beginning, because this cultivated feeling begins to generate a magnetic aura, an invisible signal that repels lack and attracts its mirror in the physical world, drawing opportunities and resources into your orbit. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your previous financial anxiety was merely the habit of feeling poor, a familiar emotional prison you mistook for your only reality. This is why it matters, for as Neville taught, feeling is the secret. It is the godlike creative force that conceives and gives birth to all manifestation, making your sustained emotional state the most important work of your day. Imagine the solid satisfaction of endorsing a check with a substantial sum, focusing not on the paper, but on the visceral emotional cocktail of gratitude, security, and quiet pride that floods your system as you do it. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that this feeling practice is not a passive waiting, but an active construction, the laying of emotional tracks that the train of events must inevitably follow. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you learn to anchor these feelings to mundane moments, feeling profound gratitude while washing dishes or experiencing lavish freedom while walking to the mailbox, until abundance is your uninterrupted baseline. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your consistent emotional signature commands your subconscious to seek and find matching circumstances, scripting your days to deliver experiences that validate your inner sentiment. Watch as your old triggers, a bill, a price tag, lose their power to incite panic, now serving as mere prompts to dive deeper into your chosen feeling, thus transforming the trigger into a tool for empowerment. This is the path forward, a daily discipline of returning to the feeling of the wish fulfilled every time you remember, making it your emotional home more real than any temporary outer sight. This is where you plant the new seed, by letting the feeling guide your actions, following the impulses that arise from this place of fullness, the inspired call to make, the intuitive investment, without needing to know the full path. This is the silent rebellion against the numbness of routine, a deliberate infusion of sacred sensation into every mundane act, thereby sanctifying your entire life as a temple of creation. This is how the inner world shifts, as your chosen feeling becomes your default setting, coloring your perception so brightly that you begin to see evidence of its coming everywhere you look. This is the birth of a new frequency, a constant emotional hum that resonates with the core of abundance itself, making you a living tuning fork for prosperity in all its forms. This is the foundation being rapport, not with transient thoughts, but with the enduring vibrational substance of felt reality, which is the only substance the universe recognizes and obeys. This is where you stop chasing and start resonating, understanding that to feel the wish fulfilled is to be it, and to be it is to have it, in a sequence as natural and inevitable as a seed becoming a tree. Picture for a moment the universe beginning to communicate in the language of elegant coincidence, where a book on investment falls open to the exact page addressing your silent doubt, or a stranger's casual remark suddenly clarifies a financial strategy that had eluded you for months. This is where the bridge of incidents becomes tangible, not as a thunderous event, but as a series of softly whispered hints and perfectly timed prompts that guide your steps toward your assumed state of abundance. This is how your inner certainty materializes as outer guidance, for the world, now rearranging itself to match your assumption, must send scouts and signals to direct your physical actions along the path of least resistance. This is the turning point where you move from hoping to knowing, because these synchronicities are the direct fingerprints of the law in motion, the first physical evidence that your inner world is dictating the outer. But that was only the beginning, because as you acknowledge and follow these gentle prompts, they grow stronger and more direct, evolving from whispers into clear instructions, an unexpected introduction, a sudden urge to visit a certain place, a dream that offers a symbolic key. This is where illusion fades, revealing that what you once called luck or randomness was always the orchestration of your own state, now becoming visible because you are finally tuned to the correct frequency to perceive it. This is why it matters, for to ignore these whispers is to reject the very help you have summoned, while to heed them is to walk in confident partnership with a universe conspiring in your favor. Envision a world where your morning question about a financial skill is answered by an afternoon podcast recommendation from a friend who had no idea you were wondering. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that synchronicity is the dialogue between your expanded self and your current awareness, a loving communication designed to build your faith and accelerate your manifestation. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you discover that these moments often arrive disguised as minor inconveniences or curious detours that, when followed, lead you directly to a person or opportunity essential for your journey. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your persistent feeling of wealth activates a latent intelligence within you, a kind of financial intuition that can spot the golden thread in the tangled tapestry of daily life. Watch as you develop a relaxed alertness, a state of graceful curiosity where you are neither desperate for signs nor blind to them, but simply open to the unfolding mystery with a sense of playful participation. This is the path forward, where you learn to distinguish true guidance from mere wishful thinking by its hallmark feeling of naturalness and a subtle, deep-seated rightness that resonates in your body. This is where you plant the new seed by acting on the smallest, simplest prompt without demanding to see the entire blueprint, trusting that the next step will be revealed as you take the first. This is the silent rebellion against rigid planning, a surrender to a more intelligent orchestration that leverages possibilities and connections far beyond your conscious mind's capacity to engineer. This is how the inner world shifts, as your life begins to feel charmed and supported. Not because the world changed overnight, but because your perception now catches the light reflecting off the hidden pathways always present. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of harmonious alignment where you feel in flow, effortlessly catching the right wave at the right time, because you are already one with the ocean's current. This is the foundation being repoured, with the living mortar of trust, each synchronous event another brick laid in the bridge that carries you from where you are to where you assume you are. This is where you stop forcing outcomes and start following a trail of breadcrumbs laid lovingly by your own awakened consciousness, understanding that the journey itself becomes a proof of the reality you have claimed. Now consider this. What if you ceased acting prosperous and instead underwent a complete psychic mutation, where your self-concept irrevocably shifted to, I am the person money flows to, through, and from, with effortless grace? This is where manifestation transcends technique and becomes ontology, the very study of your being, as you shed the identity of a seeker of wealth and crystallize into the embodiment of wealth itself. This is how you command the unseen forces, for the universe can only mirror back to you the unchallenged assumptions you hold about yourself. And when I am abundant becomes a non-negotiable fact in your inner dialogue, the outer world has no choice but to agree. This is the turning point where your desires begin to chase you, because they are merely echoes of who you have already become, rushing to catch up with the new vibrational signature you emit. But that was only the beginning, because this identity shift recalibrates your entire perception of value, allowing you to see abundance not just in currency, but in time, ideas, relationships, and the boundless creativity you now recognize as your true capital. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your old identity was a collection of borrowed beliefs, a costume you can now remove, seeing the scarcity-minded person as a character you played, not who you are. This is why it matters, for every doubt is now seen as an echo of a ghost. Every fear, a phantom limb of a self you have consciously amputated, leaving no root for lack to regrow. Envision a world where you make decisions from a foundation of expansion rather than contraction, saying yes from overflow rather than no from fear, because your core identity knows resources are infinite and self-replenishing. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that this identity is not an arrogant boast, but a humble acceptance of your divine inheritance, your rightful state as a creator in a universe of limitless supply. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you find that this new identity expresses itself in subtle, powerful behaviors. You delay less, you invest in yourself unapologetically, you negotiate from strength, not because you've learned tactics, but because it is who you are. This is the unveiling of the mechanism, where your revised self-concept automatically purges people and circumstances that resonated with your former lack, making space for alliances that reflect your new worth. Watch as your language cleanses itself of poverty phrases, your jokes no longer degrade your value, and your internal monologue becomes a ceaseless, gentle affirmation of your own worthiness and capability. This is the path forward, where maintaining this identity becomes your primary focus, guarding it more fiercely than any bank account, for you now know it is the source from which all accounts are filled. This is where you plant the new seed, by introducing yourself to yourself each morning as the abundant version, feeling the truth of it in your bones before you even open your eyes to the day. This is the silent rebellion against the hypnosis of the collective, a solitary stand where you define yourself against all contrary evidence, knowing you are the sole author of your being. This is how the inner world shifts, as your identity becomes a self-sustaining reactor of prosperity, generating the feelings, thoughts, and actions that perpetuate its own reality in an endless, fruitful loop. This is the birth of a new frequency, the resonance of I am, the most powerful creative phrase in existence, now specifically tuned to the chord of limitless affluence. This is the foundation being rapport, with the indestructible material of self-knowing, a foundation so secure that no market crash or external opinion can ever shake its core. This is where you stop trying to get rich and start expressing richness in every gesture, knowing the having will follow the being as surely as breath follows life. Ask yourself, what happens when you meticulously plant the new seed of abundance, but still anxiously dig at the soil each day, checking for a sprout, and in doing so, crushing the very delicate shoots trying to emerge from your previous faithful planting. This is where you learn the supreme discipline of divine indifference, releasing the white-knuckled grip on the how and when, understanding that your constant checking is a prayer of doubt that undermines your own creation. This is how you surrender the burden of micromanagement to a higher intelligence within you, for your conscious mind's job was to choose the state and feel its reality. Its job is not to engineer the complex chain of events that will deliver it. This is the turning point where you transfer your faith from the visible process to the invisible law, knowing with certainty that what you have assumed and felt as true must crystallize in form, even if the intermediate steps seem illogical or slow. But that was only the beginning, because this letting go is not passivity, but active trust. A shift in focus from the missing thing to the fullness of your current life, thereby allowing the bridge to be built unseen. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your anxious attachment to the outcome was the last vestige of the old identity of lack, a final layer of control you must relinquish to fully inhabit the new state. This is why it matters, for as Neville Goddard taught, the sign that you know you have done it is when you no longer desire it, meaning it moves from a burning want to a calm knowing, a fact awaiting its hour of appearance. Picture the deep relief of dropping a heavy weight you didn't know you were carrying, the unclenching of your mental fists, and the spaciousness that floods in when you cease mentally staring at the empty space where your manifestation should be. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that the universe operates in the fertile darkness of the unseen, and by letting go, You give it the space and time to orchestrate the perfect, often surprising, fulfillment. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that this release is the ultimate act of self-love, a declaration that you are already whole and complete, and the desire is merely an added grace to an already perfect now. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your detachment sends a powerful signal of faith to the subconscious, confirming the assumption is so real that you no longer need to monitor its progress. Watch as your energy shifts from tense anticipation to relaxed participation in life, opening you to receive the inspiration and opportunities that were previously blocked by your frantic searching. This is the path forward, living from the finish line so completely that the desire becomes a memory of the future, leaving you free to engage fully and joyfully with the present moment. This is where you plant the new seed by turning your back on the garden, knowing you have planted well, and instead tending to the beauty of other aspects of your life with full attention and love. This is the silent rebellion against the cultural obsession with hustle and control, a radical act of allowing that demonstrates a profound understanding of how creation truly works. This is how the inner world shifts, as the mental space once consumed by monitoring is liberated for creativity, joy, and peace, which in themselves become powerful magnets for abundance. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of serene trust that is far more magnetic than desperate wanting, for it resonates with the vibration of already having. This is the foundation being repoured, with the concrete of patience, a divine timing that aligns your fulfillment not with your ego's schedule, but with the optimum moment for your greatest good and the good of all. This is where you stop being a laborer in the field of your desire and become the satisfied owner of the estate, walking the grounds in peace, knowing the harvest is inevitable and already yours. Think of the moment when you, from your current perceived lack, consciously give a tithe, a generous tip, an unexpected gift, not as a loss, but as a profound declaration to the universe that the river is flowing and you are a willing conduit of its waters. This is where you actively disprove the lie of scarcity through embodied action. For generosity from a place of faith is the ultimate affirmation of abundance, a physical shout that echoes in the silent realms where your reality is shaped. This is how you prime the pump of universal circulation, understanding that giving and receiving are not two actions but one circular motion, and by initiating the flow with trust, you command the cycle to complete itself in your direction. This is the turning point where you stop seeing money as a commodity to be hoarded and start recognizing it as energy to be directed, a current that must move to grow, and your act of giving is you placing yourself directly within its current. But that was only the beginning, because this conscious generosity rewires your emotional relationship with money, replacing the clutching fear of depletion with the expansive joy of contribution, which is the precise emotional signature of true wealth. This is where illusion fades, revealing that every past act of stinginess was a prayer for more lack, a contraction that told the universe you did not have enough to share, and the universe faithfully obliged. This is why it matters, for your willingness to give from what you have, whether it is time, attention, or a dollar, broadcasts a fearless confidence in your source that the law cannot ignore. Imagine buying a meal for a stranger, feeling not the pinch in your wallet but the swelling in your heart, knowing this act is not an expense but an investment in the very idea of overflowing abundance. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that generosity is not a moral commandment for salvation, but a practical, metaphysical law of increase, a cosmic law that says to keep, you must give. To increase, you must circulate. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that giving without any thought of return, from a pure place of joy, plants a seed of immeasurable potency, for it is an act completely free of the vibration of need. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your gift, given in the feeling of wealth, acts as a living symbol that your subconscious accepts as proof of your abundant identity, thereby strengthening that identity immeasurably. Watch as your giving shifts from calculated charity to spontaneous, joyful sharing, the extra change left for the next person, the book passed along, the genuine compliment, each a tiny pebble creating vast ripples in the pond of your reality. This is the path forward, making generosity a non-negotiable rhythm of your life. A sacred habit that continually reaffirms your role as a distributor, not a drain, in the economy of the infinite. This is where you plant the new seed by giving precisely what you wish to receive. Whether it is money, understanding, or opportunity, for you are declaring to your deepest self that this thing is so plentiful, you can afford to share it. This is the silent rebellion against the hoarding mindset of the world, a brave and joyous proof that you live from a different source, an inexhaustible inner treasury. This is how the inner world shifts as you begin to feel genuinely rich in the act of giving, an inner fullness that no external circumstance can provide or take away. This is the birth of a new frequency, the resonant hum of open-handedness, which attracts people, resources, and luck because you are now in harmonic alignment with the principle of perpetual flow. This is the foundation being repoured, with the living stones of faith in action, each generous act another stone laid in the unshakable fortress of your prosperity consciousness. This is where you stop seeing yourself as an endpoint for wealth and start knowing yourself as a crucial, active node in its endless circulation. And in that knowing, you become irreversibly magnetic to its source. Picture for a moment the series of seemingly ordinary or even frustrating events, a missed connection that forces you to take a different route, a casual conversation that sparks an unrelated idea, a sudden no that closes a door you were desperately trying to open. Each one an invisible thread being woven into the sturdy fabric of your fulfillment. This is where you develop the eyes to see the bridge being built beneath your feet, understanding that the universe's engineering is often disguised as inconvenience, coincidence, or even failure in the narrow scope of the present moment. This is how you maintain your state amidst uncertainty, for by recognizing these events as necessary components of your manifestation, you transform anxiety into awe and patience into active, watchful participation in a divine plot. This is the turning point where you stop judging individual events as good or bad and start perceiving the unfolding pattern, the hidden narrative that is faithfully connecting your inner assumption to its outer equivalent. But that was only the beginning, because this recognition fuels your faith exponentially, each recognized bridge incident acting as a confirmation that your assumption is alive and working, thus strengthening the very assumption that creates more of them. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your past frustrations were often aborted, bridges you rejected through disbelief, interpreting the storm as proof the ship was off course instead of the winds that would carry it home. This is why it matters, for your conscious acknowledgement of the bridge is a cooperative act with the law, a signal that you understand the process and are willingly playing your part in the middle of the story. Envision a world where a job rejection leads you to a coffee shop, where you overhear a discussion about a budding startup perfectly aligned with your passion, a door that would have remained shut had the first one not slammed. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that the bridge of incidents is never a straight, logical line from A to B, but a uniquely tailored, often circuitous route that reorganizes your entire life to support your new state. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that the most powerful bridges often involve a necessary death, the end of a limiting identity, the release of an unserving relationship, clearing the exact space required for the new reality to be fully received. This is the unveiling of the mechanism, where your persistent feeling of the wish fulfilled acts as a homing beacon, pulling toward you the specific people and circumstances needed for its construction, even if they arrive in unexpected packaging. Watch as you begin to greet unexpected delays, chance meetings, and sudden inspirations with a quiet internal smile, saying to yourself, this is part of the bridge, thereby stripping them of their power to disturb your peace. This is the path forward, a detective's game where you look for the subtle connections and serendipities in your day, collecting them as evidence that your manifestation is not coming, but is already here in its formative stages. This is where you plant the new seed by thanking every twist and turn, seeing each as a divine delivery, a necessary piece of the puzzle falling into place exactly on time. This is the silent rebellion against linear cause and effect thinking, an embrace of a more magical, synchronous reality where everything is connected and conspiring for your good. This is how the inner world shifts, as your life ceases to feel like a series of random events and begins to feel like a guided, purposeful story where you are both the author and the delighted reader. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of knowing participation, where you feel in partnership with the creative intelligence of the universe, co-creating your reality step by synchronistic step. This is the foundation being repoured, with the living material of recognized grace, a foundation that is not static but is actively being built with your every conscious, faithful observation. This is where you stop waiting for the grand finale and start celebrating the subtle, perfect choreography of the journey, understanding that the bridge is not just a means to an end. It is the transformation itself, and walking it is the fulfillment. Ask yourself what happens when you stop perceiving every financial obstacle, the skeptical partner, the competitive colleague, the daunting market fluctuation, as a personal attack, and instead see it as an impersonal, mechanical feedback loop, a final echo of the old state you are leaving behind. This is where you claim ultimate emotional sovereignty, for by depersonalizing the opposition, you drain it of its power to incite reaction, allowing you to respond from your new state of abundance rather than from the triggered wounds of the past. This is how you walk through the fire untouched, understanding that the outer world's resistance is not a conspiracy against you, but the inevitable and necessary friction that occurs when a new assumption grinds against the inertia of the old world. This is the turning point where you stop fighting shadows and start holding your light steady, knowing that the shadows are not entities, but absences of light, and your persistent assumption is the only light required to dissolve them. But that was only the beginning, because this impersonal view reveals that every doubter is merely a personification of your own former doubts, a mirror held up to show you what you once believed so you can choose once more to disbelieve it. This is where illusion fades, stripping the mask from the face of lack and revealing its true nature, an impersonal force of nature, like gravity, which only has power over you if you accept its rules as unchangeable law. This is why it matters, for your emotional reaction is the fuel that sustains the opposition, and by meeting it with impersonal curiosity, you starve the phantom and accelerate its disappearance from your story. Imagine looking at a critical comment on a business idea, not as a critique of your worth, but as a gust of wind testing the structural integrity of your assumption, proving its strength rather than diminishing it. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that the law is impersonal and mechanical. It will manifest the conditions of your dominant assumption, whether that assumption is one of ease or struggle. And the opposition is often just the manifestation of a fading, contradictory belief. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you discover that by blessing the opposition, by mentally revising it to support you, you perform the highest alchemy, transforming the lead of resistance into the gold of confirmation for your new state. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your calm, non-resistant stance allows the opposing energy to pass through you and dissipate, rather than meeting it with equal force, and thereby giving it solidity and longevity in your reality. Watch as your inner dialogue shifts from "why are they doing this to me?" to "this is showing me where my belief is not yet solid," turning every challenge into an invaluable diagnostic tool for your own consciousness. This is the path forward, where you interact with the world from the understanding that nothing external has meaning save the meaning you consciously, and now wisely, choose to assign to it. This is where you plant the new seed by mentally revising every confrontational encounter into a harmonious one before sleep, seeing the skeptic congratulating you, the obstacle becoming a stepping stone, until your subconscious accepts this as the only reality. This is the silent rebellion against the drama of persecution, a serene detachment that declares you are no longer a player in the old, conflict-based story, but the author of a new narrative of unanimous support. This is how the inner world shifts, as you feel a profound and unshakable safety, knowing you live in a responsive, mirror-like universe that can only show you what you believe, and you now believe only in your own power and inevitable success. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of detached mastery, where you observe the play of circumstances with the compassionate indifference of a director watching actors perform a script you have already rewritten. This is the foundation being poured with the cement of non-reaction, creating a stability within you so profound that no external turbulence can ever again shake your sense of self or your financial destiny. This is where you stop being a warrior, battling the world, and become a gardener, tending your state, knowing that weeds only grow where you focus your fear, and your focus is now solely on the flourishing harvest you have already imagined into truth. Consider the possibility that the moment you truly succeed is not when the money arrives, but when you so completely inhabit the feeling of your goal achieved that your present reality becomes a ghost, a fading photograph of a life you have already mentally and emotionally moved beyond. This is where you stop preparing to live and start living from the finish line, performing the mundane acts of your current day, paying bills, grocery shopping, commuting, from the embodied consciousness of the person for whom financial freedom is a settled, boring fact. This is how you collapse time, for in the realm of imagination where all creation begins, your desire is already a finished fact, and by living from that point psychologically, you pull its physical equivalent into your current timeline with gravitational certainty. This is the turning point where your actions become inspired not by need, but by the natural expression of your fulfilled state, leading you to make different choices, have different conversations, and perceive different opportunities that were always there but invisible to your old eyes. But that was only the beginning, because this lived assumption begins to soften the hard edges of your current reality, making your present circumstances feel temporary and dreamlike, while the wish fulfilled takes on the solid, tangible quality of true reality. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your previous life was lived from a perspective of not yet, a state of perpetual anticipation that forever kept the reward on the horizon, never within your grasp. This is why it matters, for this is the practical application of Neville Goddard's principle. You must be conscious of being what you want to be, and that consciousness, sustained, fathers it into existence. Envision a world where you sit in your current kitchen, but you feel the expansive quiet of your future paid-for home, the emotional texture of security so vivid that the sound of a dripping faucet cannot touch the deep peace you have anchored within. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that living in the end is not denial of your current situation, but a profound acceptance of a higher truth that overrides it, a truth you privilege above all sensory evidence to the contrary. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you discover that this state is maintained through a series of mental diets and inner speeches, where you constantly narrate your life from the perspective of the wish already fulfilled, silencing any inner voice that speaks from the past. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your subconscious, convinced by your persistent feeling and inner narrative, begins to command your autonomic nervous system, altering your body language, your tone of voice, and your bioenergy to match that of a wealthy person. Watch as your relationship with time transforms. Deadlines loosen their grip, panic about the future subsides, and you operate with a graceful patience, because in your mind, the goal is already achieved, and you are merely enjoying the journey toward its physical appearance. This is the path forward, a constant, gentle orientation of your inner compass toward the feeling of the end, making every decision by asking, what would the version of me who has this already do, say, or choose in this moment? This is where you plant the new seed by letting the end justify the present, allowing the satisfaction of the completed goal to color your now with gratitude and a playful detachment from temporary lacks. This is the silent rebellion against the tyranny of time and current facts, a declaration that your imagination is the only time and the only fact that holds any creative power. This is how the inner world shifts, as the wish fulfilled becomes more real to you than the room you are sitting in. And that inversion of reality is the precise moment the universe must shift to match your conviction. This is the birth of a new frequency, the vibration of the end achieved, which acts as a tuning fork that brings every atom of your life into harmony with that completed picture. This is the foundation being repoured with the living material of fulfilled desire, a foundation that exists now in the fourth dimension and whose shadow is steadily solidifying in your three-dimensional world. This is where you stop being a beggar at the door of your own desire and become the host welcoming it into your experience, knowing that the party has already started in the unseen, and the guests, your manifestations, are already on their way. Suppose you discover that each assumption, like a single drop of water, seems insignificant on its own, but when repeated daily with emotional conviction, it begins to carve a grand canyon through the bedrock of your old reality, creating an irreversible channel for a new river of abundance to flow. This is where you witness the quiet, cumulative power of your discipline. For the law works not through occasional grand gestures, but through the relentless, daily drip of your chosen feeling and unwavering mental narrative. This is how you achieve what seems like overnight success to the outer world, through the unseen, patient layering of assumption upon assumption, each one a brick in the invisible mansion you are constructing in the unseen, which must eventually appear in seen form. This is the turning point where you stop seeking immediate proof and start trusting the exponential curve, knowing that your inner work is compounding in the darkness, gathering momentum that will eventually break through into your reality with sudden, undeniable force. But that was only the beginning, because this compounding effect begins to generate a self-sustaining energy field around you, an aura of inevitable success that starts to influence events and attract co-creators long before the physical results manifest. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your previous attempts at manifestation failed not because the law was false, but because you withdrew your assumption before it had compounded enough to cross the threshold into visibility. This is why it matters, for understanding this principle grants you the patience of a master sculptor, knowing each tiny deliberate stroke is necessary and that the masterpiece is guaranteed if you simply do not abandon the work. Envision a world where you review your bank statements from a year ago, not with shame, but with awe at the invisible compound interest your assumptions have been accruing in a metaphysical account, an account that is now maturing and paying out dividends. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that the most critical period is often just before the breakthrough, when the inner pressure of your compounded assumption is at its greatest. And any doubt now would be like dynamiting the canyon walls you've nearly finished carving. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you find that this compounding assumption begins to rewrite your memory, making your past feel like a logical progression toward this moment of wealth, thereby solidifying your new identity as someone who is always destined for abundance. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your repeated mental scenes and emotional states forge new neural pathways, physically altering your brain to perceive, interpret, and attract prosperity as your default setting. Watch as small external confirmations begin to snowball. A surprise check, an unexpected discount, a valuable referral, each one a tangible echo of your compounded inner work, building your faith not in the law, but in your own ability to wield it consistently. This is the path forward, maintaining your assumption with the same daily regularity as brushing your teeth, a non-negotiable ritual that you perform not out of desperation, but from the calm knowledge that you are building your future with scientific precision. This is where you plant the new seed, by recognizing that today's assumption is not a standalone prayer, but a vital contribution to the colossal structure you began building the moment you first decided to change your state. This is the silent rebellion against the culture of instant gratification, a commitment to the invisible mathematics of spirit, where your fidelity to the end guarantees the sum total of your efforts will equal the manifestation. This is how the inner world shifts, as your assumption gains so much mass and gravity in the unseen that it begins to pull the circumstances of your life into its orbit with increasing speed and undeniable authority. This is the birth of a new frequency, a resonant wave that builds in amplitude with each day you persist, eventually becoming a tsunami of transformation that sweeps away the old landscape of your life to reveal the fertile new one beneath. This is the foundation being repoured, not with the quick-drying plaster of hope, but with the sedimentary rock of layered daily conviction, a foundation so deep and wide that it can support a skyline of realized dreams. This is where you stop counting the days and start making the days count, understanding that each one is a deliberate deposit into the bank of your becoming, and the interest rate on faith is infinitely compounding. Now consider this. What do you do when your bank statement screams scarcity, when a deal falls through, or when an expected windfall evaporates? Yet you have been faithfully living in the state of the wish fulfilled for weeks. This is where your mastery is truly forged, for you must now choose to privilege your assumption over every screaming fact, understanding that these contradictions are the final and most convincing illusions cast by the dying state you have left behind. This is how you demonstrate your sovereignty, by looking directly at the empty account, and, with a calm heart, declaring it a shadow, a lie, a mere echo of a past you have already emotionally and psychologically vacated. This is the turning point where you must not ask, "Why is this happening?" but instead affirm, "This is happening because my new assumption is so powerful, it is forcing the old world to reveal its emptiness before it collapses completely." But that was only the beginning, because these stark contradictions are actually the universe's stress test, designed not to break you, but to prove to you, beyond all doubt, that your inner conviction is stronger than any outer appearance. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the evidence is not solid at all, but a projection on a screen, and you hold the projector, the power to change the film from lack to abundance at its source, regardless of the current image. This is why it matters, for if you can hold your state while staring directly into the eyes of its opposite, you graduate from a student of the law to a master of it, and the universe has no choice but to surrender its secrets to you. Imagine receiving a final notice in the mail, holding it in your hands and feeling not a spike of fear, but a surge of power. Knowing this paper is a phantom from a story you are no longer reading, and you mentally revise it into a confirmation of your solvency before you even put it down. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that Neville Goddard's period of Sabbath is this very interval where you rest in the certainty of your assumption while the world catches up. A rest that requires heroic faith when the storms of the old world are fiercest. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that these moments of contradiction are your most potent creative opportunities, for your unwavering peace in the face of them broadcasts a signal of such undeniable authority that it scrambles the old reality's code and forces a rewrite. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your persistent state, under this pressure, generates a psychic heat so intense it alchemizes the lead of bad news into the gold of a breakthrough, often in a sudden and unexpected way you could never have engineered. Watch as your emotional response becomes your barometer. If you can observe the bad news with detached curiosity, as a scientist observing an interesting anomaly, you have won, for you are no longer emotionally entangled in the old story. This is the path forward, treating every piece of contradictory evidence as a sacred actor in your play, one playing the role of villain to make the final triumph of your hero, your abundant self, all the more satisfying and real. This is where you plant the new seed by speaking to the contradiction, mentally telling the overdraft notice, "You are not what you appear to be. You are a symbol of the old story dissolving. And I thank you for your part in showing me my power." This is the silent rebellion against the consensus reality, a solitary stand where you, alone in your room, with a bill you cannot logically pay, smile because you know you have already paid it in the only reality that matters. This is how the inner world shifts, as you develop a sublime indifference to the mirror, knowing you can change the face looking into it, and therefore the reflection must, in time, change to match. This is the birth of a new frequency, a vibration of unassailable truth that is so coherent it begins to disrupt and dissolve the incoherent vibrations of lack, causing them to literally fall apart in your experience. This is the foundation being repoured, with the adamant of tested faith, A foundation that is now earthquake-proof, because it has weathered its greatest tremors and remained not just standing, but immovable. This is where you stop being a slave to circumstances and become their master, knowing that the darkest hour is not the hour before defeat, but the hour before the dawn you have already seen in your imagination, and you are merely waiting for the earth to turn toward its light. Picture for a moment the ancient, hidden principle of spiritual baksheesh, the deliberate, secret act of giving not from your physical surplus, but from the imagined abundance of your fulfilled desire, as a direct investment in the feeling of the wish fulfilled itself. This is where you bypass the limitations of your current ledger and engage in the economics of the imagination, dropping coins of faith into the cosmic fountain long before the physical coins land in your palm, thereby proving to your deepest self that the supply is already here. This is how you build a bridge of faith, so tangible it can support the weight of your manifestation. For when you give mentally from your assumed wealth, visualizing a large donation, tipping a server lavishly in your mind's eye, or mentally endowing a cause, you are performing the ultimate act of convincing the subconscious. This is the turning point, where your inner generosity becomes more real than outer scarcity. And this conviction, felt repeatedly, begins to command the physical world to align with the financial freedom you have already emotionally spent. But that was only the beginning, because this mental and emotional generosity generates a powerful psychic momentum, creating a vacuum in your physical reality that the universe must fill with actual substance to match the outflow you have confidently imagined. This is where illusion fades, revealing that your past physical stinginess was rooted in the fear of an empty source, a fear you now dismantle by acting, in imagination, as if the source is infinitely deep and endlessly generous. This is why it matters, for this practice is a direct application of Neville's teaching to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and live and act upon that assumption. And acting includes your imagined acts of grand, joyful contribution. Envision a world where you mentally walk through your favorite charity's doors and hand the director a check for an amount that would currently stagger you, saturating the scene with the profound satisfaction and dignity of being a major benefactor. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that spiritual baksheesh is not about fooling yourself, but about educating your senses to accept the reality of wealth by experiencing its emotional consequences, the joy of giving, before the physical means arrive. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that these imagined acts of lavish giving purify your desire, shifting your motivation from selfish gain to joyful contribution, which aligns you with a higher, faster frequency of manifestation, where gain is a natural byproduct of your expanded identity. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your subconscious, receiving these vivid impressions of generous outflow, concludes you must have abundant inflow to support such behavior, and rearranges your outer world to make that logical conclusion a physical fact. Watch as this practice softens your grip on money, eroding the poverty consciousness that views every dollar as a scarce resource to be clutched, and replacing it with the consciousness of a wealthy steward through whom money flows to bless and multiply. This is the path forward, making spiritual baksheesh a daily imaginative ritual, a secret game where you fund dreams, solve problems, and spread fortunes in your mind, all while feeling the visceral sensations of having done so. This is where you plant the new seed by allowing these mental acts to alter your self-concept. You are no longer someone who needs to receive, but someone who is already in a position to give. And that shift in identity is the most magnetic state of all. This is the silent rebellion against the evidence of your wallet, a defiant celebration of wealth's emotional truth that gradually, irresistibly, calls that truth into physical form. This is how the inner world shifts. As you begin to carry yourself with the unspoken confidence of a patron, your demeanor hinting at invisible resources, which in turn influences how others perceive and respond to you, opening doors you hadn't even knocked on. This is the birth of a new frequency, the resonant sound of circulation, which attracts reciprocal currents of abundance because you have become a living declaration that the flow is active, generous, and endless. This is the foundation being re-poured with the gold leaf of imagined generosity, a foundation that feels lush and expansive, because you have already, in your imagination, used its wealth to enrich the world. This is where you stop seeing yourself at the end of the receiving line and start placing yourself at the head of the giving line, knowing that in the divine economy, the giver's position is one of ultimate power and infinite supply. Now consider this. What do you do when your bank statement screams scarcity, when a deal falls through, or when an expected windfall evaporates, yet you have been faithfully living in the state of the wish fulfilled for weeks? This is where your mastery is truly forged, for you must now choose to privilege your assumption over every screaming fact, understanding that these contradictions are the final and most convincing illusions cast by the dying state you have left behind. This is how you demonstrate your sovereignty, by looking directly at the empty account and, with a calm heart, declaring it a shadow, a lie, a mere echo of a past you have already emotionally and psychologically vacated. This is the turning point where you must not ask, why is this happening? But instead affirm, this is happening because my new assumption is so powerful, it is forcing the old world to reveal its emptiness before it collapses completely. But that was only the beginning, because these stark contradictions are actually the universe's stress test, designed not to break you but to prove to you, beyond all doubt, that your inner conviction is stronger than any outer appearance. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the evidence is not solid at all, but a projection on a screen, and you hold the projector, the power to change the film from lack to abundance at its source, regardless of the current image. This is why it matters, for if you can hold your state while staring directly into the eyes of its opposite, you graduate from a student of the law to a master of it, and the universe has no choice but to surrender its secrets to you. Imagine receiving a final notice in the mail, holding it in your hands, and feeling not a spike of fear, but a surge of power. Knowing this paper is a phantom from a story you are no longer reading, and you mentally revise it into a confirmation of your solvency before you even put it down. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that Neville Goddard's period of Sabbath is this very interval where you rest in the certainty of your assumption while the world catches up. A rest that requires heroic faith when the storms of the old world are fiercest. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that these moments of contradiction are your most potent creative opportunities, for your unwavering peace in the face of them broadcasts a signal of such undeniable authority that it scrambles the old reality's code and forces a rewrite. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your persistent state, under this pressure, generates a psychic heat so intense it alchemizes the lead of bad news into the gold of a breakthrough, often in a sudden and unexpected way you could never have engineered. Watch as your emotional response becomes your barometer. If you can observe the bad news with detached curiosity, as a scientist observing an interesting anomaly, you have won, where you are no longer emotionally entangled in the old story. This is the path forward, treating every piece of contradictory evidence as a sacred actor in your play, one playing the role of villain to make the final triumph of your hero, your abundant self, all the more satisfying and real. This is where you plant the new seed, by speaking to the contradiction, mentally telling the overdraft notice, you are not what you appear to be. You are a symbol of the old story dissolving, and I thank you for your part in showing me my power. This is the silent rebellion against the consensus reality, a solitary stand where you, alone in your room with a bill you cannot logically pay, smile because you know you have already paid it in the only reality that matters. This is how the inner world shifts as you develop a sublime indifference to the mirror, knowing you can change the face looking into it, and therefore the reflection must, in time, change to match. This is the birth of a new frequency, a vibration of unassailable truth that is so coherent it begins to disrupt and dissolve the incoherent vibrations of lack, causing them to literally fall apart in your experience. This is the foundation being repoured with the adamant of tested faith, a foundation that is now earthquake-proof, because it has weathered its greatest tremors and remained not just standing, but immovable. This is where you stop being a slave to circumstances and become their master, knowing that the darkest hour is not the hour before defeat, but the hour before the dawn you have already seen in your imagination, and you are merely waiting for the earth to turn toward its light. Ask yourself what happens when your assumption reaches critical mass, when the inner frequency you've broadcast becomes so dominant that the universe must now perform the grand silent ballet of rearranging people, places, and events to conform to your new truth. This is where you witness the law in its majestic operation, as seemingly random encounters conspire to introduce you to the exact investor who believes in your vision, or as a global shift opens a niche in the market perfectly aligned with your forgotten skills. This is how the bridge of incidents reveals its completed form, not as a single event, but as a cascading series of synchronicities that feel like the universe nodding in agreement, opening doors you never saw and dissolving obstacles that once seemed permanent. This is the turning point where you move from faith to direct knowledge, because the world is now actively proving your assumption correct, delivering fragments of your desire in ways that feel miraculously tailored, yet perfectly logical in hindsight. But that was only the beginning, because this rearrangement often includes the gentle but firm removal of people and commitments that resonated with your former lack, a divine clearing that creates both the literal and energetic space for your new wealth to land. This is where illusion fades, revealing that what you once called your reality was merely a temporary configuration, a set that can be struck and rebuilt overnight once the director, your conscious assumption, calls for a new scene. This is why it matters, for this rearrangement is the physical answer to your mental work, the undeniable sign that you have successfully impressed the subconscious, and it is now commanding the outer world to reflect its new instructions. Envision a world where a sudden, unexpected relocation places you in a city buzzing with opportunity for your field, or where a friend's casual invitation to a dinner party leads to a conversation that catalyzes a lucrative partnership you couldn't have planned. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that the world is not static but fluid, a responsive medium that molds itself to the dominant consciousness within it, and your consciousness has just issued a new decree. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that this phase requires your active cooperation through inspired action. For the universe will present the open door, but you must still have the courage to walk through it without demanding a guarantee of what's on the other side. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your inner peace becomes a magnetic force, attracting solutions and resources that carry a signature of ease, often bypassing the arduous paths you once believed were necessary for success. Watch as old problems begin to solve themselves without your effort. A conflict resolves, a debt is forgiven, a technical issue vanishes, as if the underlying script sustaining those problems has been deleted and replaced. This is the path forward, maintaining your state of gratitude and wonder without slipping into attachment, understanding that this rearrangement is natural, not miraculous, and is the expected result of your disciplined inner work. This is where you plant the new seed by consciously cooperating with every hint the universe offers, saying yes to the small, inexplicable nudges that guide you toward the next step of your unfolding prosperity. This is the silent rebellion against the belief in a hard and unforgiving world, a living testament to its inherent plasticity and its divine willingness to conform to the commands of a disciplined imagination. This is how the inner world shifts, as your trust in the law becomes unshakable, not because you read about it, but because you are now living within its tangible daily proof, watching your environment literally reconfigure to support your wealth. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of harmonious orchestration, where you feel in graceful partnership with a benevolent intelligence that is intimately involved in the details of your life's unfolding. This is the foundation being poured, with the living elements of a world now in alliance with your desire, a foundation made of opportunities, aligned people, and serendipitous timing that feels like solid ground beneath your feet. This is where you stop wondering if it will happen and start marveling at how beautifully it is happening, understanding that the rearrangement is the manifestation, And the final goal is simply the punctuation mark on a sentence you have already written. Think of the moment when the first substantial evidence of your new state materializes. A sudden bonus, an unexpected inheritance, a business deal closing. Not as a final destination, but as the initial wave of a tide you have summoned, requiring a new consciousness to receive and manage it without resurrecting old patterns of lack. This is where your spiritual maturity is tested, for the arrival of abundance can shock the system if you are not already fully identified as the person who naturally commands it, risking a return to scarcity through mismanagement or guilty hesitation. This is how you cement your transformation, by receiving this inflow with profound gratitude, yet also with a calm sense of rightness, as if welcoming a trusted friend who has finally arrived after a long journey you always knew they would complete. This is the turning point where you must steward not just the money, but the energy and consciousness it represents, directing it with the same purposeful assumption that called it forth, thereby initiating a virtuous cycle of perpetual increase. But that was only the beginning, because this first major inflow serves as a living mirror, reflecting back to you any remaining fragments of unworthiness or fear you must now consciously dissolve, lest they become ceilings for your future growth. This is where illusion fades, revealing that the true victory is not in the sum received, but in the unshakable identity you have built, which now views this wealth not as a miracle, but as a natural confirmation of your inherent worth. This is why it matters, for how you handle this first fruits determines the sustainability of the harvest. Wise, conscious stewardship plants seeds for future harvests, while fearful hoarding or reckless spending replants the seeds of lack. Envision a world where you endorse that first large check with a steady hand, your heart filled not with giddy euphoria, but with a deep, solemn responsibility to honor the source by amplifying this abundance through intelligent, inspired use. This is where truth breaks through, showing you that wealth is a current that must keep moving through you, and your role as a steward is to be a clear, conscious channel, investing wisely, enjoying fully, and giving generously, all from the unshakable knowing that you are its source, not its temporary possessor. Yet something deeper was waiting, and so you discover that true stewardship involves revising your relationship with money in real time, catching any impulse born from old lack consciousness and replacing it with an action born from your new, abundant identity. This is the unveiling of the mechanism where your calm, authoritative management of this inflow sends a powerful feedback signal to the subconscious, affirming, "I am exactly who I assumed I was," thereby locking in that identity and guaranteeing more consistent manifestations. Watch as you intuitively know how to allocate these new resources, what portion to save, what to invest in your growth, what to use for joy, and what to give. Not from a rigid budget, but from a flowing intelligence that arises from your state of wealth itself. This is the path forward, using this tangible proof to strengthen your assumption further, allowing it to compound now not just in the unseen, but in the very real material world you are now actively shaping. This is where you plant the new seed, by immediately dedicating a portion of this inflow to a future vision, perhaps investing in a new skill or seeding a dream project, thereby telling the universe you are ready for the next, even greater wave. This is the silent rebellion against the poverty mindset that would tell you to clutch this money tightly, a bold demonstration instead that you live in limitless flow by allowing this wealth to move, grow, and bless others through you. This is how the inner world shifts, as the physical evidence finally synchronizes with your long-held assumption, creating a feedback loop of confidence, where your outer world now actively teaches you to trust your inner power more deeply. This is the birth of a new frequency, one of grounded mastery, where the euphoria of receiving matures into the quiet power of wise ownership, a vibration that attracts not just money, but respect, opportunities, and the capacity for even greater creation. This is the foundation being repoured, now with the physical bricks of manifested desire, each one laid with the conscious intent to build not just a bank account, but a legacy of abundance that extends beyond you. This is where you stop being a manifester and become a creator, understanding that this inflow is simply your first conscious creation, and your stewardship of it is the first chapter of a new story you are now empowered to write without limits. Consider the possibility that the final stage of manifestation is not a destination of having, but a transformation of being, where you no longer look to any outer source for abundance, because you have irrevocably become the conscious source yourself, radiating the frequency of wealth from your core, like a sun radiates light. This is where the circle of creation closes perfectly, for you began this journey seeking something external, and now realize you were always the point of origin, the wellspring from which all supply flows, and your financial reality is simply the downstream echo of this self-discovery. This is how you achieve permanent financial peace, by internalizing the source so completely that markets may fluctuate and accounts may vary, but your fundamental sense of security and creativity remains unshakable, rooted in an identity that knows itself as limitless potential expressing in form. This is the turning point where your desire to get transforms into your power to give, and in that giving you experience the perpetual, self-replenishing nature of the source you have become, forever circulating abundance without fear of depletion. But that was only the beginning, because this state of being begins to generate its own gravity, effortlessly attracting and creating wealth not as a goal, but as a natural byproduct of your expanded consciousness, much as a healthy tree naturally bears fruit without striving. This is where illusion fades for the final time, stripping away the last vestige of the seeker and revealing the finder who was there all along, the God within who imagines worlds into being and clothes those imaginings in the substance of reality. This is why it matters, for this is the ultimate freedom Neville Goddard pointed toward. The realization that you are the operant power, and your world is, in every detail, a fulfilled desire of your own consciousness, leaving no room for doubt, only creative play. Envision a world where you wake each morning not to check your circumstances, but to decide from the palette of infinite possibilities which shade of abundance you will wear that day. Knowing your financial reality is as malleable and responsive as clay in your hands. This is where truth breaks through in its final, glorious form, showing you that manifesting abundance was never about money. It was about awakening to your own divine nature, with money being merely one of the countless languages in which your creativity can now fluently speak. Yet something deeper was waiting. And so you discover that becoming the source infuses every aspect of your life with a sacred purpose, where your work, your relationships, and your simplest daily acts become vessels through which the infinite expresses and expands itself. This is the unveiling of the eternal mechanism where your I Am consciousness, now fully identified with abundance, constantly projects a world of plenty, and your physical senses, once the jailers of lack, have now become its faithful witnesses. Watch as your life becomes a living lesson for others still asleep in the dream of scarcity, not through preaching, but through the silent, compelling evidence of your peace, your generosity, and your effortless capacity to create and solve. This is the path forward, which is no longer a path at all, but a perpetual state of creation, where you consciously assume new desires for the sheer joy of experiencing the bridge of incidents that leads to their fulfillment, mastering the art of life itself. This is where you plant the new seed eternally, understanding that every assumption is a universe waiting to be born, and you are the fertile ground, the sower, and the harvest all at once in an endless, glorious cycle. This is the silent rebellion that has become a silent revolution, a complete overturning of the worldly order within you, establishing the kingdom of heaven as your permanent psychological dwelling place, from which all things are possible. This is how the inner world shifts, until there is no longer an inner and outer, only a single, seamless expression of the I Am that you are, forever creating its world in the image of its current assumption. This is the birth of a new frequency that is, in fact, the oldest frequency, the fundamental vibration of I Am that I Am, tuned specifically to the chord of limitless creation, which includes all abundance within its spectrum. This is the foundation being rapport for the final time with the living stone of self-knowing, a foundation that is not beneath you but is you, solid, eternal, and capable of supporting any dream you dare to assume. This is where you stop navigating financial doubts and start commanding financial realities, not as a tyrant, but as a loving creator, having completed the journey from beggar to king, from seeker to source, forever home in the abundant heart of your own imagination.